There was no dying on the battlefield, no thundering of hooves, no glorious end delivered by an enemy's sword. Instead, your life would pass in silent decay, trapped inside a body swollen with disease and regret, surrounded by whispers and sickness. This was the destiny awaiting Kublai Khan, not as an ordinary man, but as the grandson of Genghis Khan, the ruler of the greatest empire the world had ever seen. Born in 1215, the weight of the legacy that fell upon your shoulders was an almost impossible burden to bear. The blood of Genghis Khan flowed in your veins, bringing with it the pressure of expectation. You were not merely a Mongol warrior. You were the heir to an empire forged with fire and terror, a realm stretching from the shores of the Pacific to the gates of Europe. But you were not satisfied with just the sword and the bow. You studied the wisdom of China, embraced its scholars, and opened the doors of your court to artists. You observed, listened, and remembered. Hardened Mongol generals, veterans of years of war, noticed you were different. Your intellect and strategic genius impressed everyone. When the year 1260 arrived, long years of war and politics carried you to the throne of the great Khan. For the first time in history, a foreigner sat on the dragon throne of China. You declared yourself the founder of a new dynasty, the Yuan dynasty. The Mongol steppes, the cities of China, the rice paddies, and the deserts of Central Asia were all under your rule. Your capital, Kublai, modern Beijing, became the heart of the empire. Marble halls, golden roofs, wide boulevards, and markets teeming with spices, silks, and precious stones. These were far grander than the tents of your ancestors. For the people, this was proof. The Mongols were not merely conquerors, but masters of civilization itself. Caravans along the Silk Road carried not just goods, but ideas. Astronomers, engineers, doctors, and poets flocked to your court. During this glorious period, a young Venetian, Marco Polo, walked the streets of Kublai and witnessed wonders that the kings of Europe could not even imagine. Polo's accounts showed that you were more than a ruler. You were a legend. But behind the splendor, cracks began to form. The empire was too vast, too heavy to carry. Each conquest brought new cultures, new languages, and new rebellions. As you tried to hold the empire together, the resistance grew. Your ambition, however, did not cease. You set your sights on the islands of Japan. In 1274, you sent your fleet, but storms annihilated your armada. In 1281, you returned with one of the largest fleets history had ever seen. Over 4,000 ships and more than 140,000 soldiers. The world had never witnessed such power at sea. Victory seemed inevitable, but nature turned against you. Typhoons shattered your fleet, and tens of thousands of your soldiers were lost to the sea. The Japanese called these winds kamikaze, or divine winds, believing their gods had protected them from the Mongols. For you, it was unspeakable humiliation. Years of planning, countless silver, and tens of thousands of soldiers were destroyed by the fury of the storm. Yet, your ambition remained. You sent your armies to Vietnam, Burma, and Java, only to meet with disaster. Jungle diseases consumed your soldiers, and guerrilla fighters attacked. Your armies returned one by one, ranks broken, morale shattered. Each defeat came at a price. More soldiers, more silver, more grain taken for Chinese peasants. The peasants groaned under the weight of taxes. The mandate of heaven, the sacred belief that the gods supported a ruler, began to slip from your grasp. And then came a tragedy no army could repel. In 1281, your beloved wife, Empress Chabi, died. She was not just your wife, but the hand that calmed your rage, the wise voice that balanced your ambition, and the only person who could quiet the storm within you. She had embraced Buddhism and showed compassion to those under your rule. Her death meant the loss of your iron pillar. Without her, you were vulnerable. The conqueror who had once challenged empires now collapsed inward. You sought refuge in wine, endless feasts, and food that numbed the pain in your chest. And as you sank into deep sorrow, the empire began to crack around you. Ministers plotted, generals whispered, and sparks of rebellion ignited in the fields. Kublai Khan, the great ruler who had reigned at the pinnacle of the world, was now besieged by shadows. The storm that would break you came neither on the battlefield nor in the waves of Japan, but within the walls of your own palace. Trapped within your own palace walls, the once unconquerable ruler of a colossal empire was now a prisoner, not of your enemies' swords, but of grief, excess, and the betrayal of your own body. The world watched from afar, but no one saw the agony behind the walls. After Empress Chabi's death, your court, once a center of power, knowledge, and entertainment, became a golden cage. Silk curtains concealed corridors where whispers circulated. Ministers bowed, generals fawned, and the court laughed at your jokes, but no one dared to speak the truth. You yearned for her guidance, her wisdom, and her presence. Without her, the discipline that was the foundation of the empire began to crumble. You sought solace in wine and feasts, temporarily suppressing the emptiness in your chest. Tables were laden with roasted meats, exotic fruits, and rivers of wine, as if abundance could fill her absence. But this extravagance only delayed the inevitable. Your body grew heavy, your legs swelled. Gout turned your joints into agony. Walking, even with aid, became torture. You remembered the armies that once obeyed your every word, the generals who held you in awe and respect. But now they looked at you differently. Once an unstoppable conqueror, you were now a man defeated by flesh and sorrow. The loyalty that bound them loosened, and whispers of rebellion and discontent circulated through the court. Every decision was made slowly and weakly, distracted and burdened by grief. Though your empire spanned continents, your authority was shaking. In distant provinces, from Persia to Central Asia and Russia, governors and local rulers began to ignore your commands. It was as if your title were merely an outdated symbol. In China, taxes fueled the peasants' rage. The common folk whispered that the mandate of heaven had been lost. They believed the gods had abandoned a ruler who could no longer protect them. Your mind, once as sharp as a sword, now blurred. Ministers who had served for decades feared your suspicions. Generals once hailed as heroes were dismissed or quietly disappeared. Fear seized the court. The palace, once full of immense wealth, became a center of tension and terror. Every smile was a dagger. Every compliment concealed a hidden agenda. You watched from your golden throne, but your view of the world had narrowed. Your health deteriorated along with your authority. Chronic pain racked your body. Your bright eyes dulled. Paralysis made speech difficult. Infection spread, and fatigue dominated every moment. Your empire, still grand on paper, was in reality fragile, shaking like a tower built on sand. The failed campaigns in Japan, Vietnam, and Java were not just military losses, but psychological wounds. Each defeat eroded the aura of invincibility you once held. Distant lands no longer trembled at your approach. Your navy, once the instrument of fate, now served as a reminder that even the mightiest must bow to forces beyond human control: typhoons, disease, and the resistance of local people. In China, rebellion seethed. Shadow societies formed, whispering that the Yuan dynasty had lost its divine right to rule. Peasants driven to starvation showed their resistance with pitchforks and torches. Bandits seized roads and canals, making trade perilous. Even in the capital, merchants grew bolder, sensing that your grasp was weakening. Reports of discontent arrived daily, but few dared to tell you the complete truth. The flattery and fear surrounding you isolated you from reality. Grief and indulgence turned into paranoia. Once loyal ministers and generals were accused of treason. Even your closest advisors hesitated to speak. A single wrong word could be their end. Shadows lengthened in the palace corridors, and fear displaced the bonds that once held your court together. Those who served acted not out of loyalty, but self-preservation. Yet, despite all this, you clung to the image of the unstoppable conqueror. You moved about in golden robes, attended by officials, still pretending the power was yours. But the mirror showed a different truth: swollen limbs, a body racked with pain, a mind consumed by loss. The empire you built with fire and steel now trembled on the brink of collapse. Outside your palace, the people sensed your weakness. Peasants rose up in small, defiant groups. Rural rebels lit fires at night to signal their resistance. In secret temples and gatherings, monks and scholars whispered that the mandate of heaven had shifted. The world that once bowed to your command was sliding toward chaos. Despite being surrounded by gold, silk, and power, nothing could halt the inevitable decay of your body and your empire. Every day, this truth became more pronounced. The stark contrast between the palace's splendor and the hunger outside, the magnificent halls and the crumbling infrastructure, the court officials' obedience and the provincial revolt. All this, combined with the cold and sickness brought by the approaching winter, caused your body to weaken further. Every movement was fraught with pain. Even sitting up in bed became a struggle. Gout and swelling paralyzed your legs. Your breath was ragged, every gasp an effort. Doctors tried everything: herbs, mixtures, prayers, but nothing could alleviate your suffering. The rhythm of the empire slowed with you. In the final years of your reign, an inescapable truth emerged. No army, no treasure, no intellect can protect a person from their own body, their own grief, or the inevitable decay of the world they once controlled. Kublai Khan, once the conqueror of continents, the lord of the world, was now a prisoner in his own palace, besieged by the memory of Chabi, the shadows of his failures, and the relentless march of time. The storm, having moved from the oceans of Japan to the corridors of the court, was silent and insidious, ready to sweep you away. In moments of fleeting clarity, you realized the end was near. But even then, your empire and your legacy still hung in the balance, trapped in an unsubmissive body, surrounded by people who feared you more than they respected you. The winter of 1293 arrived, cold and merciless. Outside Cambalic's walls, waves of famine, rebellion, and discontent rose. Inside, wrapped in silks, you lay, a swollen body, joints crying out in pain, a restless mind, and an empty heart. The great Khan was no longer a god of war or a master of empires. He was a human being awaiting the final reckoning, held captive. And this reckoning would not come in battle, nor in the clash of swords. It would come in the silent, suffocating agony of being overwhelmed by your own body, accompanied by the whispers, the fear, and the slow unraveling of everything you had labored to build. The empire trembled. Winter gripped tight, and Kublai Khan waited, knowing the end was inevitable. You, once the master of the greatest empire the world had ever seen, were now a shadow of the man who thundered across Asia on horseback. With the winter of 1293 came pain, exhaustion, and never-ending ache. Your legs were swollen and useless. Gout turned your joints to agony. Diabetes left you weak. Your breathing was shallow and ragged. Even a simple movement in bed required the help of servants. No army, no treasure, no advisor could save you. Every day, your reflection in the polished bronze mirrors showed a stranger. The navies and armies you commanded were gone. In their place was a colossal figure of pain, imprisoned in unsubmissive flesh. The palace felt more like a tomb than a throne room. Outside Cambalic, the empire quivered. Peasants and secret societies rebelled. Heavy taxes, corruption, and famine enraged the populace. In distant provinces, governors ignored orders. The dream of a unified Mongol Empire unraveled thread by thread. Even in your weakness, you were aware your death would mark the beginning of the end. But no one in the court dared to speak the truth. The court bowed, whispered, flattery wrapped you like a suffocating cloak. No one confessed the empire was collapsing. The great Khan's decline was a secret kept by fear, protected by lies. On February 18th, 1294, your pain reached its peak. Your once brilliant mind blurred with agony and delirium. Your skin sagged. Your eyes were dull and distant. Your voice was weak, barely a whisper. Servants struggled to move your massive body. A final humiliation for a ruler once synonymous with unstoppable power. You close your eyes for the last time, taking shallow breaths. Each breath was a surrender to the inevitable. At the rare age of 78 for that era, you passed from this world, not in glory, but in the slow pain of a body betrayed. Death did not end the drama. For the Mongols, burial was a sacred act. Power must be protected even after death. Your body, massive and imposing, had to be concealed from enemies and grave robbers. The exact location of your tomb remains shrouded in secrecy. As with your grandfather, Genghis Khan, legends speak of a journey along a death road. An unfortunate witness would be slain to protect the secrecy of your final resting place. Some whisper that you lie near the sacred Burkhan Khaldun mountain beside your ancestors. Others imagine a colossal underground chamber filled with treasures, weapons, and priceless artifacts to accompany you to the afterlife. True or legend unknown, these stories reflect both admiration and dread. Even in death, you faded into the shadow of mystery. However, the world you left behind was irrevocably changed. Your chosen heir, Timur Khan, ascended the throne but lacked your authority, vision, and charisma. The unity that made the Mongols unstoppable began to break apart. Rival factions maneuvered for power in the court. Governors in distant provinces ignored orders. Rebellion spread in the countryside. The Yuan dynasty clung only to the northern provinces. In China, discontent grew bolder. Taxes, corruption, and famine drove the people to extremes. Secret societies and local leaders claimed the Mongols had lost the mandate of heaven. Natural disasters, floods, droughts, and plagues reinforced the perception that divine favor had shifted. Over the decades, the Yuan dynasty's control outside China weakened. The Golden Horde in Russia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, and other Mongol states went their independent ways. The dream of a single Mongol empire vanished like smoke carried by the wind. The final blow came in 1368. Red Turban rebels seized Beijing, drove out the Mongols, and established the Ming Dynasty. Your dynasty, though born from brilliant conquests and vision, lasted less than a century. Your story remains unforgettable. You stand as the one who finally brought China entirely under Mongol rule, opened the empire to the world, and shaped centuries of history with your reign. The image of Kublai Khan remains, not just the conqueror, but a man ultimately defeated by his own humanity. Excessive luxury, grief, disease, and isolation show the fragility of even the greatest rulers. You were larger than life, but in the end, you could not escape the limits of the body, the inevitability of death, or the consequences of ambition. Every empire falls, and every ruler is human. Palaces, wealth, and armies are transient. Even the greatest conqueror is subject to decay. Your legacy serves as a reminder that power cannot protect against the most cruel nature of all. Your victories shape the world. Your collapse teaches a deeper truth. Everyone, the mightiest, the brightest, the most feared, dies. And sometimes, death comes not on the battlefield, but in the silent agony of a palace turned tomb, amidst the whispers of those too afraid to speak the truth.